Good afternoon, and welcome to People Making Money, one of the Way to Wow shows. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm very excited to have a guest with me today, Dashama Gordon. Through all the health things that have been going on with me, Dashama has been a real trooper in rescheduling. I think you were on scheduled to be on the show at least twice before. But before I formally introduce Dashama, I just want to remind you that we are here every day at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we talk about all things related to professional success, wealth building, and how to really lead a successful life. That's kind of our remit, as we used to say in the military. And so one of the things I like to do most is have someone on the show who can really broaden our perspective of what success looks like. If you're like me, my parents' idea of success was about, this big, and it consisted of make a lot of money, right? And while there's nothing wrong with that, certainly, sometimes the pursuit of lucre, as they say, doesn't necessarily make for a rewarding life. And so I'm very, very happy to be able to bring to you Dashama Gordon. She's an author, a filmmaker, a teacher. She is an expert when it comes to flow state, which, if you go back to our YouTube channel, I did a show about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's. He was kind of the founder, if you will, of that concept of flow, and it is really an essential idea to living a life worth living, if we say so. Without further ado, because I really want Dashama to have as much time as possible to talk. Dashama, welcome to People Making Money. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Kevin. First of all, I love your whole topic, people making money, because we're in such a weird time on Earth where, we're in this interesting economy and a lot of things are going on, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, good. So, typically when I have a guest, I sort of challenge them to go back as far as they're willing and talk about, I know for me, when I was a boy growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut. I think every kid, of my generation, my age did, because I watched, the moonshot and all that kind of stuff. And of course, I never I never got close to that. But I'm always curious to hear what people wanted to do when they were young, and how that kind of and as a starting place, because then we can kind of see how that played out over their career.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you, when I was a young person, my mother wanted me to be a lawyer. I think when your parents kind of plant like a seed, you're like, oh, maybe. But I remember I always had this very gregarious like personality. So I kind of felt I'd like to be probably like an actress or something, like, because I just like to make people laugh, and I was a little bit of a goofball, and so as a young person, I think my aspiration, it changed several times, but I do remember always having in the back of my mind, like, I wanted to do something to make the world a better place. And when I was 12, well, before that, I'll say when I was 7, my mother lost her mind, and she became schizophrenic. So I actually ended up growing up in foster homes. And it was really interesting. Early on, I learned a number of things through that. But one of the foster mothers, actually, she was an extended part of our family, eventually took us in. And she gave me a book. It was when I was 12 years old. It's called How to Be Like Women of Influence, 20 of the Greatest Women of the 20th Century. And she gave me this book. And I really attribute a large part of how my life unfolded to that book, probably because it was the first glimpse that I had to positive mentors, in specifically with women and successful women, especially where I had come from, and it was just not a lot to look up towards. And also my grandparents, both of my grandfathers were in World War II. And one of my grandfather on my father's side, they came over from England because it was during World War II. They were Jewish, and it was a really big, bold move to become, leave the country, come to where they could have more safety and freedom in America. And I think in our family, having that military kind of sort of brought to me this feeling like, we're here to be of service. And I always had that inside of me. And then, it kind of like changed shape over the years. But I remember when I was like I think in 7th grade, I took my first video production class. So I got really into film. At that time, I had so much fun. It was me and my little best friend at the time, Jason, and we went around school in like 7th grade, and we got our friends out of class and interviewed them in the hallway. And I just remember having so much fun being on camera, talking to people, and just that introduction to like filmmaking at a young age. And a lot of people I've talked to that are into different things, it was usually an early glimpse that got them into it. And even one of my acting coaches one time said, like, if you look to like the books that you read as a kid, the cartoons that you watched, whatever it was, those early kind of programs sort of shape who you become. And I remember watching like Reading Rainbow and those types of things. And then I ended up growing up to be an author. And I do think that it's just so interesting to see how like the early exposure does shape who you end up becoming. And I can see that for myself and for many others.
So you brought up something I think that's very, very important, and that it resonated with me. So when I remember being in 6th grade, I was going to a school in Santa Barbara called Laguna Blanca School, and the library was like this very small, separate building. And in the winter, when it was raining, it was very cozy inside. And I read book after book about successful people. And in many ways, kind of like what you were saying, I think they became my mentor. One in particular I remember I read a lot about was Walt Disney, and how often he failed. And yet in the end, right, he not only succeeded spectacularly, but in a way that really brought such tremendous joy to so many people's lives. So it's interesting that books were kind of your mentor as well. How has that affected not just the book itself, but the idea of books as mentors? How has that affected what you've done, in your life? Because you mentioned, the idea of being that you're an author, right? So.
Absolutely. It's very fascinating because I think like there's many people who read books. I think there are two kinds of people. There's the people that are readers and people that are not readers. And I've known people that are not readers, and I'm like, okay, I don't understand that. But basically, the readers that I know more often than not attribute a great amount of the success to the reading and the books. And it's because you just get access to information that you never would normally have. Now, in today's age, we do have like YouTube and you can Google stuff. And so it's much different now. But you and I came from a generation. I know I'm on the cusp. Where like millennial cusp is where I remember we didn't really have email even in college, and like there are people today that didn't have ever one moment of life without an iPhone, so like there's different types of people, and the people that grew up without all that technology, like myself, although we did have computers in school as a young person, but they weren't a big part of things. It was really like books were the thing, and we still went to the library, like had to like check out a book. And so that whole aspect of like actually how pivotal books were for our generation and for the generations like before me, that it's different now. Cause I think so many people, they're learning online and it's like video based, which is a little different type of learning. But there's even research that shows that when you read it and also write, it activates a different part of the brain than when you watch a video, for example. It doesn't mean that one is necessarily better than the other, but it's activating different aspects of your brain. And so when we talk about flow state, we're also looking at like different aspects of the brain to become activated. And when you learn to access different parts of your brain, we'll call it. I mean, there's different ways of understanding that, but like neural networks that are at work for us, that we can start to branch out into access of intelligence that's beyond the normal realm or beyond the normal range for somebody who, let's say, doesn't read or doesn't have access to certain types of information because of their experience up until now. So like for me, and even like if you talk to people like Oprah, I mean, that's why they start like book clubs, is because they recognize the value and importance of reading, and how it doesn't matter how many videos you watch or podcasts necessarily that you listen to, but like reading is actually still, and it's never going to go out of style in terms of like the importance of that and the effect that it has on your brain development. And even people like, you hear stories of the top Warren Buffett and the top people in the world, and one of their number one daily routines is reading, let's say, like 500 words or whatever their thing that's like a requirement of doing their day is, like reading is usually at the top of that list. And so I'm a huge advocate, but I think that the biggest thing that I'll say, the takeaway of it, is like exposure to new ideas in a way that you normally wouldn't get access to, especially someone like myself growing up in the foster care system, and like to have access to stories about people who, came from nothing and became wildly successful and impactful. I would never have known about that. And for myself, and the way that my mind learns, when I hear that anybody, even if one person ever did something, it tells me I can do that too. Now, I also have a belief we can do anything no matter what, but like, that's like the story of Hussein, I think it was Hussein Bolt or whatever, whoever that broke the 4-minute mile, in the Olympics, and everyone believed it was impossible until he did it. But then the year after he did it, like hundreds of other people did it. So it was like unlocking within the mindset of all these people, oh, it's possible now. And then all of a sudden everyone could do it. And that's kind of how things work in life. So like once you learn at least one other person that exists has done something, all of a sudden it's like available to us now. And so that's the power that stories and books have upon our development and the way that our life unfolds.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you mentioned the book about the 20 successful women. Was there one in particular that you still remember is still kind of an iconic for you to this day?
That's a great question. I actually would say the whole book was so impactful because the way they formatted the book was that each woman represented like a character, a quality of greatness. So like one, for example, I remember Mother Teresa was in there, right? So she would represent love and compassion, that type of energy, right? And then they demonstrated with her story how she embodied that. And then another person, let's say like Amelia Earhart, she was like courage, right? So she, and so then there was like Oprah was in there, and I'm trying to remember the words she represented, but her story impacted me so much because she had come from a very different but similar childhood. Her mother was 14, she had to give her up. There was like all these aspects that were kind of like sort of similar in her development in the early age, and then she grew up to be such a success. So when I learned of someone like Oprah, for example, at such a young age, that like she came from a really, really hard start with a not perfect childhood, and then she grew to this success, that gave me a glimpse that like, okay, so it has nothing to do with this environment that I'm in. I actually can create the success no matter what. So like it planted the seed. And then those other ones, like for example, I remember Anne Frank was one of them, and she was one of the people in the Holocaust, and she survived, and just the idea that someone could survive such atrocity and then come out with such a beauty and to make a contribution through her memoirs, it gave me this other perspective that yeah, I can help a lot of people by sharing my story in the way, it's a different story of course, but in a way that she did, and that it's almost part of our responsibility that we share, so that's how we carry like a torch for the new generations coming through to like help them through whatever difficulties that they're facing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're in I think junior high school, you're making videos. So as you're completing high school, what was it you decided to do as you're taking that step into independent adult life and career and all that?
Well, I was one of those children that I changed my major about 7 times in college. So it wasn't like, I know what I'm going to do. Like, it wasn't like that at all. It was more like, okay, let's see. And so I knew my first passion was I want to go save because at the time there was this big thing about the redwood forest, and they were clear cutting the trees. And there was this woman that was living in the redwood tree for 2 years, Julia Butterfly Hill. She had camped out in the tree to try to like stop the logging. And I had this deep passion, like, I'm here to save the world too. Like, and so I did this whole fundraiser to try to like help this like woman who was doing this kind of protest to like stop the logging. And so I was originally thinking to move to California because I had this passion of this tree mission. And then, but my grandparents, they lived in Florida. So I really, at the time, because I had grown up, separated from my family, I decided, I don't want to be near my family. So I decided to go to college in Boca Raton, where my grandparents were retired, and then my other sisters kind of all congregated. So it was our first time being together after having our childhood separate. And so in college, it was the first time I got to really get to know my sisters, and we lived in the same town, and we even went to the same university in Florida. And so, but I changed my major a number of times. I remember, like, I started out, I was like, okay, I'm going to be, because remember I told you my mom wanted me to be an attorney. So I was like, okay, I want to be an attorney. So I was going to do social science or whatever. And then I wanted to do environmental science. And then I was going to do health science. And then I was like, I want to do something else. So I went and I did a study abroad in Spain, and I studied international business, and I got a certificate, like a minor in international business in Spain, in Madrid. And then when I came back from that European trip, I changed my major again. But at the time, me and my boyfriend, we created a club at the university called Entrepreneurs United. And it was like this club for entrepreneurial young people, and we used to bring in like motivational speakers. And I thought, okay, we're going to do something in business, but they didn't really have like a entrepreneur degree, right? So basically I was like, okay, I'm going to do something with business. And at the time I was already doing the business, international business, as a minor. So I went with a communication degree because I felt, well, if you can learn to communicate, I think that can help you in anything that you decide to do. Because I remember one day when I was changing my major for the 7th time, I was running on the track behind the university. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what I really want to study? I really want to study, how does energy work? Like, why don't they have a degree of that? Like, I was just so interested in like, how do we get energy? And like, so this was like the budding kind of seed of like where my life ended up evolving to this like lifelong dedication to this concept of flow. And how does that work? And I started in Toastmasters when I was in 7th grade as well. So like giving speeches, I was always really attracted to oration and to be able to communicate. But I still hadn't put together the full picture of like, okay, what does it look like, this career, right? And so that was the beginning. And then I remember after graduating with the communication degree, and I actually got the Student of the Year award one year for stumping my organic chemistry professors, asking them questions about the nature of the universe. They couldn't answer me. They even asked the top people in the whole college. Nobody knew the answers to these questions. So they gave me an award, Student of the Year, for stumping everyone. And but it was interesting because I realized there's a finite amount of information you can get from college, actually, and that there was just like so much that I still wanted to know. And so I came out of college like, all right, now I'm really going to start figuring out what I'm going to do now, because like I got this degree and I still have no clue. And so I kind of started, exploring. But I remember I was doing a job right out of college, and I was working like it was a corporate type of job in sales. I was recruiting travel nurses, and I was really good at it, but I was so good at it that like it took me like 1 hour to do the whole day's work. And so the other 7 hours I was just bored to death. And I got really depressed because I was in this environment that was kind of stifling my creativity, and I just felt like there was no purpose to life. And I got actually quite depressed, and it hit me so hard that I went into like a year-long depression that affected me on many levels, in my relationship that I had at the time and many things. But I believe that was one of the biggest blessings, because it led me to ask the deeper questions of like, what would I do with my life, with my time here, if money was no object and that I could just literally do what I wanted and that I was passionate about? And as I asked those questions, it led me more in this direction once again, which was like, I wanted to be able to serve. That was something early I knew. I wanted to be able to make a positive impact. I really love health and wellness, and that was something that I knew. And so those little pieces started to come together. And I remember I got this message and it was like, Google inner peace. And I like, who did Google back in 2004, right? Who knows? I just Googled inner peace. And I ended up finding a yoga teacher training actually. And so that was my first yoga teacher training, even though I had been practicing yoga my whole life, because, you know, as an athlete, we did a lot of different, you know, yogic types of practices. But basically, I did a yoga teacher training when I was 24, and I ended up starting that. And it healed me on so many levels because I had so much trauma from this childhood, and I had been hit by a car. And so I had scoliosis. And the doctors had told me there's nothing you can do to heal scoliosis. You just have to like manage the symptoms. And I always had in the back of my mind this feeling like, no, there's got to be a way to heal this. And I met a yoga teacher who told me that she had healed her scoliosis with yoga. And it gave me, like I said earlier, like that glimpse of like, I can do that too. And so I just dedicated my time and my energy to like learning how do we heal ourselves with this amazing ancient science, which back then wasn't that commonly popular. Like not a lot of people were doing yoga 18 years ago, but there were people doing it, but it wasn't mainstream like it is today. Now 30% of Americans have practiced yoga at some point. And it was interesting. So it got me really back into my passion of life. Doing that yoga teacher training changed my life so dramatically. For the first time, my depression went away and I was like singing and dancing and I felt joy and I felt this energy, what we talk about, which is flow state, which is like this joy and this high vibration, this feeling of interconnected to everything, and this like being able to access wisdom and intelligence that I didn't know before, and that it just would come through me. And this feeling of flow came through that practice in such a way that it started very early in my path as a teacher to change me in such a fundamental way that it inspired me that everybody needs access to this information. Like this is something they should teach to children. So I actually even started teaching it to kids. I was teaching in the schools and in the hospital, in the private schools, and lots of places teaching. And kids really have fun with yoga. But I developed a whole DVD line. Like there was a whole bunch of stuff right away that I did, and I can share more about the early part of that. But it was very interesting because like it was just coming from this feeling of like everyone needs to know about this. This is literally like the medicine of everything, and why don't people know about this?
So one of the things that strikes me as I listen to you is you accomplish so much even at an early age. I can imagine that people are watching this and thinking to myself, well, you know, Dashama can do this because she's extraordinarily self-disciplined and extraordinarily self-confident. But I don't have that kind of discipline. I couldn't do that. So how would you respond to someone who would essentially attribute to you this high degree of self-confidence and self-discipline?
That's a great question. Honestly, I wasn't always like that. Like that's something you build as a muscle. I remember there was a time where I actually, because I had a big drinking problem, because my mother, the reason she lost her mind was because she was an alcoholic and she was addicted to crack. And it was like she had all this problem. So I ended up getting into drinking early in middle school too. Like I was drinking, like sneaking out of my whatever home that I was at and going and getting drunk. And I even got arrested for drinking twice at school and got suspended in ninth grade and in 12th grade. So I got in a lot of trouble. I was like in trouble with the law and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the idea that it just came naturally is not the case. It was more like it saved my life. So for example, when I got into sports, and even though I had all this trauma and I had, I was getting in trouble with the law and I was drinking and I had a lot of issues psychologically, physically, emotionally, but that when I joined a team, for example, I joined the running team, and for the most part, I was like, okay, I'm on this team. I got to show up for that. I can just like not go. So like that, like literally just like committing to something. And I'm the type of person that if I commit, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm not just going to go sometimes, not go sometimes, like if you're going to go to school, you're going to go to school every day, hopefully, or if you have a job, you go to the job every day. So like everybody has those things in their life that they do commit to, or that they do have discipline with. And then they give themselves a lot of slack in the other stuff because they're like, well, I'm already so tired. It's the mind that talks you out of the like translating that discipline into your other areas of life. Like if you're a human in America, especially, you probably brush your teeth every day, mostly, hopefully, like you do these things, you take a shower, like there are these things that we put into like, okay, that's that. But like when I look at discipline, because I've been a coach my whole life, and when I look at discipline, I'm like, if you can be disciplined in any one thing, you can be disciplined in any other thing. It's really just a mindset. So if you're like, okay, I'm brushing my teeth every day, you got to look at that like, okay, you made a habit of that. So what I actually ended up doing, because I knew this early on, and your question is really relevant and perfect, because honestly, I had that same issue with a lot of clients. So they would come and then they, like one of them would be like, when you're telling me to do this, I'm doing it. But when I'm at home, I'm on my couch. And I was like, yeah, I see what you mean. So basically what I found was some people are more intrinsically motivated and some people aren't having that as a natural tendency. Okay, no problem. So what I found though, and that science has shown, is that we can actually condition ourselves to create new habits, and it's really only the habituation that creates the discipline. So we have a habit of brushing our teeth, that's why it doesn't feel like extra work. Or we have a habit of taking a shower, like, right, we have these habits of things that we do that we know we got to do. So you just have to do that with any new thing that you want to add into your list of things that you do every day that you know you need to do. So if you look at it that way, if you go, okay, I know for my health and well-being, I should do some form of exercise every day, or like I need to do my yoga every day, or I should at least do 10 minutes of stretches after I run. When you know that thing, that whatever it is going to really make your life better, and then you still talk yourself out of doing it, that's a mindset issue. So then that's when meditation comes in, is you go, okay, so how do I work with my mind? My mind is working against me. Okay, so you have to like treat the, and in yoga, we actually, from the ancient thousands of years, they've written about the mind, and they often call it like that, it's like a monkey, because the mind, it just does whatever, like it's just all over the place. And so if you allow the monkey to rule your life, you are at the mercy of this monkey mind. And so what you have to do is learn to train the monkey mind. And even in my first book, Journey to Joyful, I have a whole chapter and it's called Training the Monkey Mind. And it's talking about that. So it's like, okay, your mind is like, I don't want to work out today, or I'm going to lay here, or I'm going to eat these Twinkies. Whatever the mind is doing, you have to look at it like a separate entity. It's like, no, that is not who I am. Who I am is the better version of me. Who I am is the one that eats healthy and that does what I know I need to do, and that like does things that are good for me and the people around me. That's who I am in my highest self. So how am I showing up? Okay, am I showing up in the highest self or like the lower self right now? And like really in that observation of self, which we often call that, mindfulness, or you can call it like self-observation, but just like observing your own mind and your behavior and your choices. Then you have to be your own like inner coach, unless you hire a coach, which is what a lot of people hired me. But it's like, if you can be your own inner coach, it's like you do your own self-correction. So when you see yourself talking yourself out of the thing that you know you should do, then you got to discipline yourself like you would if you had a new puppy. And that puppy's peeing on the floor. And you're like, no, we don't pee on the floor, and we don't, be lazy. And we brush our teeth every day, and we exercise because we know it's good for us. And not only because we know it's good for us, but because it actually feels good. And so it's also that tendency towards making time and space for things that we know feel good. And usually in the beginning, let's say exercise doesn't feel good sometimes. Like if you're new to yoga and you're like, it's hurting because you're all tight. And a lot of people say, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. But it's like the people that aren't flexible are the ones that need it the most, because they need to stretch. And so it's never comfortable those first period of whatever couple weeks or what have you. But as you get past the pain of the starting blocks, and then you start feeling better and better. And then you're like, wow. And then you get to this point with any new habit where it not only is no longer discomfort, but now it's actually enjoyable. And that's really with any new habit, whether it's waking up early, exercising, doing things like reading, whatever it is. The beginning, it's like there's like this phase where it's not the best, not super enjoyable, and then you get through the hump of it, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't know how I could ever live without this. And that's with any new habit. And there's so much science and psychology research that's been done about habit forming. And some people say, it takes 21 days. Some people say 60, but it's somewhere between 3 to 6, maybe up to 8 weeks. But there's a period of time that you need to do something consistently. And what it does is it starts to rewire the neural synapses in the brain. And so when you create these new neural networks and the brain starts being like, this is who we actually are, this is what we do every day, that's when something becomes automatic. So it's like when you drive to work and you don't have to think about the turn you're going to make because it's so automatic. You've created that neural network and now you just can go through and do it without thinking. That happens with any new habit if you stick with it for long enough consistently.
So interesting. So many questions racing through my head too. So what do we do then when we're working on building a habit, right? And we fall off the wagon, so to speak. Like we make a commitment, let's say, to exercise 4 times a week, and it's now Friday, and we've only exercised once that week, right? And the week is over in another day or two, so we're not going to make our 4 days a week, right? What do we do about that to keep ourselves on track?
It's a good question. There's a few things that I think are effective. When I first launched the 30-day yoga challenge, which was my attempt to get people to do a daily commitment that would create these neural networks that would create the new habit in 30 days, felt like, okay, if you could do something every day for 30 days, even if it's only 2 to 5 minutes, that you would create this habit. Now, here's the thing that I noticed was that it works. And what really, I think, makes it work is that if it's bite-sized, right? So if you tell yourself, I'm going to do an hour 4 times a week, and then you're busy and you can't do it, you're setting yourself up for failure. And then your psychology is like, oh no, I'm a failure. And then it's like, I can't actually achieve my goals, and then it actually is a spiral in a bad negative direction because you kind of set yourself up for failure. Whereas if you set yourself up for success, which is more like, okay, even if I do 5 minutes, that will count, right? Let's just say that, because everybody knows if you have 2 days left of the week and you didn't get all 4 exercise days in, you're not going to make it. But if you said, okay, I want to do 5 minutes a day, it doesn't matter if it's 11:55. You could still get that 5 minutes in that day. You're not going to have to say, I'm a failure today. You can fit it in. You have to make it bite-sized enough that you can fit it in. Now, if you're busy, you have a family, you have work, you have all these obligations, and then you're trying to be like, and I'm going to do an hour a day of exercise and an hour a day of reading. And, you're just like setting yourself up for like a failure. And then that's not nice to yourself. So it's like part of self-love is setting yourself up for success. So giving yourself more like littler goals in the beginning. And then if you do more than that, then it's just bonus. So if you were like, okay, I'm going to do 10 minutes a day, 4 days a week, that's doable no matter what. Right? Even if you do it while you're talking on the phone, like you can multitask with certain things, right? So like you can always get it in if you keep it doable enough. And then the other part of it is accountability partners. And that's another thing that I created with our community. Like when we did the 30-day yoga challenge or any of our kind of like things that we do, other people are doing it at the same time. And we have like Facebook group or an app, or we have different ways that like people are seeing each other doing it. This is also why teams and sports work so well, because if you got other people that are doing it and they see you and you see them and you're accountable to that, you're like 1,000 times more likely to do it because you're like, okay, they kind of are going to notice if I don't show up. And so there's this part of the human psychology that wants to like show up because of the knowing that. Whereas if nobody knows, you never let anybody know about these goals. That's why they also talk about writing your goals down and even like announcing them publicly to be more accountable, even if you just announce them to your spouse or your family, but somebody outside of yourself should know about your goals, because then you're held accountable to those in a bigger way, even if it's just on a psychological level. So these are some of the little sort of hacks that you can do that I think you will always set yourself up for success, both intrinsically because of the way that the mind works, but also with your time schedule. Because most of the time when people talk themselves out of something or they don't reach their goals, it's because time management and just really not actually creating a winning opportunity for themselves that they could definitely succeed at.
Right. So, I mean, I'm guessing you didn't learn about, how the mind works, how to build habits, how success works, in a communications program at college. So how did you go from, okay, I graduated from college, I have my communications degree, I have my minor in international business, I got myself trained as a yoga instructor. How did you go from there to, author, filmmaker, and someone who can speak so cogently about these ideas?
That's a great question. I would say there's a few parts to it. First of all, I have an insatiable appetite to understand things. So I'm actually so grateful that Google exists, because actually whenever I think of something that I don't know the answer, if I can't get it immediately just from like asking source to like give me the answer, I Google it. And I'm always researching, and I will read like 5 articles just to make sure that the information is aligning between the sources. And I always go to the best sources. I've worked with Harvard and Stanford and a number of high-level professional kind of like experts in different fields. And I'm just constantly in this insatiable hunger of understanding things. So like if something I want to know doesn't like if I don't know the answer right away, I'm like looking it up, I'm reading a book, I'm listening to podcasts, and like I really feel that one of the basic human needs that we all have is to grow and to evolve. And if we're not growing and evolving, which includes gaining more information and understanding about how life works, then we get into this like stagnant, more or less, like that's what leads to depression and stuff, or like this types of stuff that happens inside of us. It's because we're not growing, we're not evolving, and we feel stuck. And so it's part of the flow state idea, right? It's like kind of like the continuous expansion of our awareness, our knowledge, our understanding of how life works. And everybody is driven in a different direction with that. Like, so one person might be super interested in understanding like new recipes to make for dinner, and that still serves that insatiable hunger for growth. If you're learning new recipes every day and you're like, oh my god, and then you're making them for your family and everyone's like, we love this new recipe. Like I do that too sometimes. Like I make these because like it's fun now on like social media, on Reels or TikTok or something. You'll have like a 1-minute video that teaches you how to make a new recipe. So I'm like, I'm gonna try that tonight. So I'm like, I whip it up, make sure it's an easy one. I whip it up and I'm like, wow. And so all of a sudden, like I felt that I grew that day, because no matter what happened, I got this new recipe that I love. And that was something. So like, even if you grow in these little ways, a little hack, like yesterday I watched I like these little hacks. Sometimes there was a guy, he's a psychologist, he was talking about how to reprogram your mind and your consciousness, and you do like little like things differently. So one of the things he said was, when you wake up in the morning, brush your teeth with the opposite hand than you normally do. Okay, so this is already very hard, but it's rewiring your brain. So it's like teaching you can do things with the other side, right? The ambidexterity, it starts to like open both sides of the brain. And you do that, and then while you're brushing your teeth with the other hand, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you say to yourself in your mind, I love you, I love you. You're looking into your own eyes and telling yourself that you love yourself. And then the third part of it is, when you get done with your teeth brushing, you do 25 deep breaths, inhale, exhale, very slow. And this is just a way, this is a very simple example of a simple way of starting to rewire your consciousness, your neural network, into doing something that it doesn't normally do. And when you go outside of your comfort zone and you start doing things you don't normally do, this is how we grow. And then all of a sudden we start feeling like, oh, if I could do that, then I could do this. And if I could do this, then I could do anything. And then you start to like really feel, and that's where confidence comes from, is like, I could do this little thing, which was like the toothbrushing. Okay, like I could do this little bit bigger thing. You know, I committed to this goal and I did it every day for 30 days. So maybe I could try it for 60, or maybe I could try a bigger goal. You do these bite-sized little steps. And one of my favorite stories that was like, actually Will Smith was talking about, because someone had said, how do you build this iconic, extraordinary career like you've created? Like, how do you start out and do that? And he said, I never start out, like if you're going to build a wall, you never think I'm going to build a wall. All you do is with every brick, you think, I want to put this brick in the most perfect way that I can in this one spot. And then everything you do has to be like that. So it's like everything, you just show up in that thing, whatever it is, and you just do it to the best of your ability each time. And that's how you create an extraordinary life.
So I'm going to go hopefully deeper for a moment on something. I had a friend of mine call me a few days ago, pretty upset. He and his wife have a teenage son, and he's been having a pretty hard time of it of late. And it finally got to the point where he told his mother, if I have to go back to school, I'm literally going to kill myself. And it wasn't it wasn't like, you know, it was like, I'm going to. And so my friend was asking me, was he said, you know, when we were growing up, the idea that we would go to our parents and say something like that was so, at least from his perspective, defeatist, he just couldn't fathom it. And so his question was essentially, you know, what's wrong with kids today? Or what's wrong with society today? But I mean, I can understand, I think, a little bit where he's coming from. What do you, because we have seen a lot more depression with young people, you know, a lot more emotional problems with younger people. What do you think is the root of that? Because you give such a positive message, a can-do, empowering message, and yet, and not that this is your responsibility, of course, but so many young people seem to not be able to, I don't know, somehow grab onto that.
That's a great question. I'll tell you first and foremost that it's a huge passion of mine as well. I actually started a whole initiative called the Children of the Future, because I think I mentioned, so when I started as a yoga teacher 18 years ago, I was teaching children and in the schools, and I realized even back then, this was 18 years ago, there was this huge obesity epidemic. So back then it was about weight, you know, people being overweight. But it's now become what's known as a mental health crisis. So the US Surgeon General in 2021, during the COVID pandemic, they declared children's mental health a national crisis. And they were showing over 50% of children reported mental health issues. Over 25% of them reported having been suicidal. And it's a huge crisis. It's not small. And this is how, you know, affecting other demographics as well. Another big one that we're working with is the veterans community. They said over 30% of veterans with PTSD are also suicidal. And so we're at a time in history where it's what I would say is, not the best way to say it, but a perfect storm in the sense where it's like a number of factors have become so intense for people, and they don't have the resources or the guidance or education or what they feel is the support perhaps to figure out how to get out of it. And I know, because I was there before, when I told you when I was super depressed. I've had several times when I was also in my own journey of suicidal. No, and I don't think I ever got to a place where I actually thought I would end my life, but I felt what they call rock bottom, where the rock bottom is like, can't get any worse. Like you just feel so bad that you're like, what is the purpose of even being alive? And that low feeling. So in the teaching that I at the Flow State Institute, there's this philosophy, and it's related to what we call the emotional tone scale. And there's like different vibrations correlated to every emotion. So let's say the lowest emotion is suicidal, right? It's like where you just can't imagine, why do you want to live? And then there's ones above that. So like above that could be like depressed, above that could be angry, above that could be melancholy, above that could be neutral. And you keep going higher, and then you get into like happiness and joy and love, and like then you're at the very highest and you're in flow and everything is beautiful and you're like, oh, life is so great. So it's like there's this huge scale. And when people are at the low end of the scale, typically there's a number of reasons. One of them, I would say, there's a correlation between this and gut health. Most people don't understand this. Your gut is where you produce over 90% of your happiness hormones. And people in this day and age are actually being poisoned by a lot of the food. Like they see that all the chemicals in the food. In fact, a number of countries are banning American food from even entering their country. Europe is doing that. Japan is, because there's so many chemicals, specifically in processed food, but especially for children. And a lot of the ones that have sugar and these cereals, and it's literally like slowly poisoning the children and people in general. So let's say your gut health is where you produce 90% of your happiness hormones, but all you have in there is like poison and toxins and sugar, right? So like right away, 90% of your happiness is getting zapped from that. Okay, so we'll just start there. Now, in addition to that, you have a number of other factors. Stress is a huge one. Most people don't realize the kind of stress children are under. Even if you don't take into consideration like testing being stressful, which it is, and they have this huge pressure on standardized testing scores for children. My sister was a 5th grade teacher, and I know she said they spend 30 to 50% of the entire school year preparing kids for these tests. And they give them so much pressure that because if you don't do well, you're going to like fail and everything. So they feel so much stress. And then on top of that, they have bullying, they have kids that are not nice, they have situations going on, and then they have social media that's also a comparison and a very competitive place that really deteriorates confidence. And then beyond that, then you also have these unrealistic standards being set in the media, in films, in TV shows, and in the media in general, showing what life should be like. If so people are like looking at Kardashian lifestyle and going like, oh my God, my life is horrible because I don't live like that. Nobody lives like that. They don't even actually live like that. They're pretending it's a show. But like there's this very blurred line between what is real and what is not real now. And there's this augmented reality, there's artificial intelligence, there's all of this like blurred lines between what's real and what's actually not real. And so as a child, having this like a barrage of this confusion on top of having toxic gut chemistry that's affecting the hormones, on top of all this other stuff, it's no wonder that there's a huge problem here. And in addition to that, they don't actually teach mental health or coping skills as a primary class in school, right? So they teach you history. They want you to know about the Battle of 1492, but they don't teach you how to manage your own mind or emotions. And so that's where the Children of the Future initiative that I started, actually, we got a letter from Vice President Kamala Harris about this, and we have a number of nonprofit partners that we've been working with to solve this, because actually to just give children this understanding as a knowledge base is my intention with this movement, is that actually if you're going to teach them history, they should also learn how to understand their mind, and like some skills could be very simple, breathing, a little bit of what we talked about earlier, mindfulness, to be able to observe what's going on in the monkey mind so that they don't feel like it's them, and they can actually feel, oh, I have some control over this. It's not just like, I'm not at the mercy of this. And to give them those skills. And when I've seen that in children, they are actually sponges for this information, and then they run with it. And the children that are introduced to these types of knowledge, they end up, one of my favorite stories was a young guy. I actually was doing some charity work. I went down to Haiti when they had the big earthquake, and I got to teach yoga to the children who lost their homes there. And there was this one young guy in Haiti. He lost his home. They were like, homeless, and I taught him yoga and meditation. years later, I found out that he kept doing it every day after that. He changed his life so much that he ended up getting into an American university, and he got a full ride scholarship to go to school, coming out of the rubble of disaster. And he was like, not everybody did that. So the difference was he had the discipline to do the meditation, but he kept meditating. And as a result of him gaining this type of control of his own mind and emotions, and to be able to direct his focus into what he wanted to create with his life, he was able to create this remarkable life coming out of nothing. And it just goes to show anybody can do that, especially in the children, but adults as well. And that it's just a matter of them having access to this knowledge and information and the resources, which is what we're so passionate about with the initiative with Children of the Future. But I do that with adults. We do that with the veterans. That's really my passion in general, because it's like, if you can, knowledge is power. If you can give people the knowledge that they can change their life, that they can rise out of nothing, like I talked about in the beginning, when I learned the story of Oprah, or I learned about Anne Frank when I was a young person, it gave me that fuel. And that was all I needed to know, if that person could do it, I can do that too. And every young person needs to have that, at least one inspiration of that, and then also the guidance on how to get there. And the nice thing is, in this day and age, because of the internet and the media, that it is accessible to everyone. It's just a matter of there's got to be the strategic implementation, which is what we're working on now.
So, I mean, listening to you, one would think that, you live life at, hyper tempo all the time, right? And yet, I really loved what you said about the Kardashians. Like, not even the Kardashians live like the Kardashians, right? It reminds me of people, when people used to tell Cary Grant all the time, I wish I could be Cary Grant, and his response to them would be, I wish I could be Cary Grant, right? Because in the end, he was really just Archibald Leach. He never became a different person, right? So how do you how do you do the self-care that you need? I'll put it that way, so that you can be at peak performance when you need to be, knowing, I presume, and maybe I'm wrong, that we can't always be at peak performance. We'll burn out.
That's a good point. I think that there's a different type of way of seeing what is peak performance. For me, I have a lot of energy, but I also do a lot of things that give me more energy, because I love to have energy. Because I told you, even I wanted to study energy when I was in college. I'm like, I love energy. And also because it's the opposite of depression, so it's a good thing to have energy. But so the idea that we are in this peak performance, it's different for everybody. So like for some, I have friends that run like 6 marathons back to back. I mean, there's just like extremes, and then I have friends that peak performance to them is that they got up that day, they had a nice breakfast, they have their kids, got some food too. Everybody's got food. We did our day, so like there's levels. But like when I think of peak performance, what I like to think is, okay, what are my goals? What am I aiming to create with this life? And then working backwards, what can I do today that would optimize that outcome, right? And so each day, like I make time for exercise every day. I always do. I just feel better. So like even if it's a walk with my dog, you do something every day, move yourself every day. I also really love breath work. I love meditation. We even developed these new little bracelets that we're getting ready to launch this really exciting thing for Bright Future Foundation on brightfuture.org. And we have these little bracelets. And this is something that I'm excited to share with people, because it's a little way to put some of this into your day that's totally doable for anyone. Because most people are like, I can't meditate, or like, an hour. They imagine you need to do like an hour of this and an hour of that. And I was like, if you could do 2 minutes, like this is 20 beats. If you do 20 deep breaths and have the affirmation going, that's like, I am peace, I am love, I am, today is a good day. Just keep reprogramming your consciousness to have peace, to feel good, to be in alignment with your goals today. So it's 20 breaths, 20 beads, and it's a meditation bracelet. And it goes with this whole thing that we're launching for the Bright Future Foundation to bring more health and wellness into people's lives. It also comes with like this elixir drink. Some of them are for energy, some are for relaxation. There's even an aphrodisiac chocolate one for people for their intimacy. But we have different things, but the intention is that you want to find things to make it kind of fun. And that's really one of the keys. That's what kids are so good at. I saw a statistic the other day, it said it takes 400 repetitions to create a new pattern. Unless you make it fun, then it only takes 10. So for kids, that's why if they're like jumping around, they can learn something very easily because it's fun. Like it programs differently if something's fun. If you feel like it's drudgery, like, oh my God, let me get through this. Like some people feel that way about exercise or about meditation. If you feel like it's drudgery, it's actually working against you because now it's taking longer for you to get the result and the benefits. So you want to find ways to make something kind of enjoyable and fun, or at least like that it doesn't feel like drudgery, and that you start to create this energy around it where you're like, I love doing that. Like, that's so cute. That's fun. That's cool. And then like, maybe I want to do it with my kids now. I want to do it with my spouse. Like it starts to create an energy around anything that you know makes you feel better, but that you have like that little bit of resistance to get into it. Make it fun, and that's why we did these bracelets. It's like, it's a beautiful, fun, simple way to kind of like plug it into your morning, or like maybe at lunch or even before bed. And you could do it with a kid, you could do it with a friend, and there's different ways of just like integrating self-care into your routine. And I always like to encourage people to really remember that you don't have to do it all every day. Right? Just do something every day that makes you feel good. And what happens, and what I've noticed is, then I want to fit a little bit more in tomorrow because I'm like, well, that felt good. Oh, maybe I'll go on a longer walk. Maybe I'll do the one up the hill this time. And every time I do the one that goes all the way to the top of the hill, it's so much more fun because my puppy loves it up there. And I said, you know what? Every time, if I can, I'm going to make it up the hill. And you push yourself because you give yourself these little rewards, because what you're creating is a fun life around wellness, instead of it like, oh, I got to fit that in, and it feeling like a to-do list. Because if it feels like an obligation or a responsibility or a to-do list, then it becomes like, ugh. But if it feels like I get to do that, yay, then you're going to put it at the top of the list, and to do it first thing in the morning if you can.
So you kind of said very quietly where you can get the brace. I can shamelessly plug you because it's my show.
Oh,
So it was brightfuture.org.
Yeah, Bright Future. So I have this foundation, Bright Future Foundation, and the acronym is BFF. And it's really fun because our bracelets, they say BFF, and it's part of this thing called the BFF Gift Club. And it's like anybody can be a part of the gift club. The intention behind it is to spread gifts of wellness. And so every gift box includes one of the bracelets. We have different colors and different styles. And we also have these wellness elixirs, really delicious drinks that you can some give you energy, some relax you, some have different effect, but really nice different flavors. And then we also have beauty oils. And it's this gift club that our intention is for people, if you're thinking about getting somebody a gift for the holidays or for Veterans Day coming up, that you want to get somebody something that is the gift that keeps on giving, which is wellness.
Mm-hmm. So I'll make sure to get the information from you. We'll put a link to that in the show notes so that people can check out your sites. And this is the Brighter Future Foundation. This is a nonprofit, is it? Or
yeah, we're a 501c3. It's Bright Future Foundation, and it's a part of our big mission with the children. So all of our revenues go to these programs. So we have scholarships that we're putting to give these programs to children, to teachers, to veterans, to people that need health and wellness. We have educational programs, certification in our trauma-informed yoga teacher training, so people can become certified to become teachers and help us and be on our team, and to bring this wellness into their communities, into your homes and families, and to your own life. It's so, I feel this is education that should be fundamental for every child in school. And so that's part of our big mission.
So, I mean, unfortunately, we are out of time. We could go on for, I think, another day. But I will tell you that not only are you inspiring I suspect for people who are struggling, I'm a single parent, and raising my daughter, you kind of go along day by day thinking, am I doing the right thing? And so much of what I'm hoping to help her with is what you've been talking about. So the validation that you're also giving people, that they're on the right path, they're truly helping and nurturing their loved ones. I think we all want to inspire, but I think sometimes nurturing and confirming is as important as inspiring, because people, we need that in order to sort of, because sometimes life is a bit of a slog, right? And we don't know what the end result is going to be in the moment. We're hopeful, and so to hear your message of what we can be doing to help each other out is, I think, like I said, tremendously reinforcing. So I do believe that people ask me, because among other things I'm a rabbi, they say, well, why are we here? I said, we're here to emulate God. And I usually don't speak religiously, but I think
I love that. I agree.
They say, okay, well, how do I do that? I said, well, God takes care of his children. So if you want to emulate God, then you need to take care of his children. So how you do that, that's the harder part. The easy part is knowing that's why you're here. We're all here to do that, to take care of each other. Mm-hmm. And I see that really at the core of your message, really at the core of your being. So just amazing things that you said. I could bubble over, and then you get really embarrassed and blush and all that. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap things up. So, Dashama, thank you so much for coming on today. Candidly, the last couple of days have been a little bit rough here at Casa Bemel, and this has really kind of lifted me up, as some of my friends say. So on a personal level, thank you so much, and on behalf of all the viewers and listeners, thank you so much for coming and sharing your time and your message. Very, very, very powerful. We'll put links to your organizations and such in the show notes, so that people can get in touch with you if they have questions, if they're seeking help. And we want to make that as easy for people as possible. So I'm going to wrap up here, and I'm going to have you hang on after we go off of being live, just so we can wrap up for a minute. But folks, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. As you know, Wednesday is our last show for the week. So I'm going to wish you a great rest of the week, and hopefully a restorative weekend. We will be back on Monday morning at 10 a.m. with Trusts and Estates Weekly. I think that one's self-explanatory, 10 a.m. Pacific time, that is. On Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, Business Lessons from the Military. And then 7 days from today will be the next edition of People Making Money. And to be honest with you, I can't remember what's on the calendar for those 3 shows. But if you go to our Eventbrite page, you will be able to find out what's going on. You can get a free ticket to join us live, or you can always join us as you are on our various social media sites. And just one last thing, if you have it in mind, I've been really blessed to talk to a lot of tremendously gifted people. If you want to check them out, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@thewaytowwow. And check them out. And I would encourage you, if you know someone in your life who's struggling, send them the link to this show and let them hear Dashama's story. Let them see her story. You will be doing them a tremendous kindness, because her message is one of, in essence, the phoenix rising from the ashes in some respect. And we all need to do that at times. And we're not always in a place where we can ask for what we want. So if you're a loving fit friend or a loving family member, you know, maybe take the time to do that and just say, hey, you know, this may help you. And that's all you have to say is this may help you. So thanks again for joining us. I hope I see you next week. And as signing off, as I always do, Marie, darling, you are my bell. Thanks very much, folks.